In a time long past, the armies of the Dark came again into the lands of men. Their leaders became known as the Fallen Lords, and their terrible sorcery was without equal in the West. In 30 years they reduced the civilized nations to carrion and ash, until the free city of Madrigal alone defied them. An army gathered there, and a desperate battle was joined against the Fallen. Heroes were born in the fire and bloodshed of the wars which followed, and their names and deeds will never be forgotten. Wednesday, August 3rd, Crow's Bridge. Yesterday our Legion entered the village of Crow's Bridge and halted there for the night. We are just 4 days' march from the besieged city of Madrigal now, and with a little luck should arrive there in time to prevent its capture by the enemy. Shiva, one of the Fallen Lords, has been attacking the city for 2 days, but so far has been held back by its defenders. We all know the battle for Madrigal will decide the fate of all the northern lands, and that if it falls we will soon have nowhere to retreat but the ocean. Fearing for their safety, the villagers here pleaded with us to remain when we broke camp this morning. None of them understand yet what is happening, but they have all seen the refugees from the south, and they are frightened. Our officers seemed unsympathetic until the people returned with 9 young pigs and 10 dozen loaves of bread. 15 of us are to stay now, perhaps to fight boredom instead of the Fallen Lords, and watch the bridge here for 2 days.
Hey, did you hear what happened to Amon's Grove?
Yeah, there were no bodies.
What'd they do with all the bodies?
Tuesday, August 5th, King's Highway. Having turned back the attack on Crow's Bridge, we headed south to rejoin the Legion in another small town called Otterferry. On our way we met a force of our own men hurrying in the opposite direction, who gave us ill news. The vanguard of our army, 20,000 men, has been camped near Otterferry for 2 days now. The mayor of that village must have guessed our plan to cross the Scamander River behind the main enemy force and to attack them by surprise. Perhaps in the cowardly hope that he would be spared when the Dark sacked Madrigal, the mayor intends to betray us to the enemy. A quick death will be too good for him, but we will have time for nothing else. One of the locals knows of the clearing where the mayor arranged his meeting with the Dark and will lead us there. Friday, August 8th, Otterferry. Our vanguard has crossed the Scamander unchallenged and remains hidden on the southern bank of the river. Their assault will begin 2 hours after midnight against Shiva's right flank, at the same time the Madrigal garrison throws open the Gate of Storms and attacks her from the front. but I won't be anywhere near Madrigal when this happens. An hour before the main attack, a small group of men and I will head in the opposite direction and strike at the enemy camp alone, hoping to divert forces and attention from the city before the real battle begins. The plan is to fight our way across a bridge and into the captured village of Comfort. From there, we'll locate the enemy camp and create as much of a diversion as possible. Every thrall that remains in the camp to deal with us is one less that our main force must hack to pieces at Madrigal. Monday, September 15th, outskirts of Tyr. The battle for Madrigal lasted 4 days without pause. Shiva fell on the first night in a spectacular dream duel with Rabican, one of the 9. No one expected this. We have never before challenged one of the Fallen and won. But the truth behind the victory is stranger than any of the rumors. Apparently the 9 found the severed head of one of Balor's enemies from the old days, buried out in the desert under several tons of sand and rock, and managed to start talking to the thing. Balor is the power behind the Fallen Lords, and we figure his enemy is our friend. They say that the head had an old score to settle with Shiva, and told Rabican that her one weakness was vanity, and showed him how to exploit it. The head appears to know something about everything, and now it has us looking for an artifact called the Total Codex. It's been located in the ruined city of Covenant, but the first group sent to retrieve it has not returned. In a few minutes, Rabican himself is going to send a few of us through a world knot to Covenant to bring back the Codex. Monday, September 15th, Shepherd's Gate, Covenant. The Watcher has entered Covenant from the north, and his tireless undead are raping the old city a second time, tearing down what few structures stand in their way, and choking the sky with dust and smoke. That he wants the book which now rests at the bottom of my pack is clear. Against my better judgment, I opened the Codex last night to a random page, and read about the life of a man not yet born, who would resurrect the Macridia and visit horrors on the world without equal in history or myth. I believed every word. I have resolved to destroy the thing before allowing it to become an instrument of the dark. Moriak is on his feet now, talking to the men. We met him and a few other survivors of the first expedition hiding in a collapsed cellar a few hundred feet away from the outer wall, and joined them for a brief rest until dawn. Moriak was Prince Regent here during King Ulrich's adolescence, and knows of an underground tunnel just outside the city which leads to Shoal, a village 4 miles away down the coast. The king's family used it to escape Covenant when Soulblighter leveled the city 12 years ago, and today we hope it will help us elude the Watcher. Friday, November 7th, the Plain of Scales. We were 2 days in that tunnel out of Covenant, the Watcher crossing above us every few hours, shaking the ground in his fury, and twice nearly burying us alive. Sometime on the second day, the tremors grew less distinct, and we were relieved to find nothing but rats and mosquitoes waiting for us when we reached Shoal. Not wishing to return west, we headed down the coast toward the old city of Scales, where we met Maeldon's southern garrison and turned over the Codex. We learned there that by coincidence the combined armies of the north are only 4 days behind us, heading for the mountains to stop the Deceiver, another of the Fallen Lords, from crossing the cloud spine before winter. But we can't wait for them. There is a world knot west of the cloud spine, and the head insists that the enemy has learned to travel through the knots. If we don't destroy this portal, we might hold the mountains only to be outflanked by forces emerging from the knot behind us. 8 Dwarven irregulars, and every man in Scales from the Legion have volunteered for the mission. Wednesday, November 12th, Fool's Traverse, Bagrada. Damn, I hate the cold. A few months of warm weather, and you forget what it's like to have your eyes frost shut and the snot freeze in your nose. And it doesn't bother the undead one bit either, I'm sure. We're up here in the mountains to stop the Deceiver from crossing into the west before winter closes the high passes. It's already started to snow pretty hard, so we shouldn't have to be here longer than a few more days. Bagrada is a maze of tiny canyons crisscrossing the mountains between the Plain of Scales and Forest Heart. There are 30 small groups of men like mine waiting at key junctions inside the pass, but the main body of our force is camped in the valley below, with hot meals and dry beds. I guess the worst thing about having a reputation for being a bunch of hardasses is that the Legion always finds itself where the fighting will be ugliest. So we're up here as the first line of defense against an attack by the Deceiver. Tyrfing just came running into camp, bellowing that our scout's signal fire has gone out. That means trouble.
They learned too late that there were satchel charges hidden among the debris.
Friday, November 14th, Devil's Overlook, Bagrada. The snow hasn't stopped in 2 days, and in some places the drifts are already twice the height of a man. Even the Fallen will have to wait until spring before they try to cross the mountains here again. But not all of the enemy retired ahead of the snow. For the last 2 hours we've watched a column of 100 soulless, separated from their masters and obviously lost, wandering the canyons below. The dwarves are running about like delirious children. It should be a spectacular ambush. Rabicon has held 7 gates, and the snow has begun there as well. We have done the unthinkable. We have pushed the Fallen back to the mountains. But our success here is tempered by Ulrich's failure to return west with the Eastern Army before winter, and the Watcher's continued presence behind us. It's not going to be an easy winter. Wednesday, November 19th, the Barrier. I have turned back my journal a few months and placed the next 2 entries in chronological order after Bagrada, where they seem most appropriate. I did not witness the events I'm about to relate, but instead repeat here the stories of those who survived them. It wasn't until after the disaster at Forest Heart that the rest of us even heard about any of this. It all started when the Nine learned that Ulrich had been captured by the Deceiver and his army decimated. I'm not certain how they figured this out, but I'll bet the Head told them. And this was back when the Head could do no wrong. At the behest of the Nine, our officers chose 5 champions from among the Legion. They were carried over the mountains by balloon and dropped at night in the rough desert 20 miles from the Deceiver's camp. Their instructions were to rescue Ulrich by any means available, and to return him to the west. I believe that the Nine were suspicious of the circumstances surrounding Ulrich's capture, and wished to discover why the Head had sent him over the mountains. Wednesday, November 19th, the Barrier. Finding Ulrich, the companions later told me, was the easy part, and breaking the enchantments which bound him the matter of but a few moments' consideration. It wasn't until they turned to escape leading the barely conscious and unresponsive Ulrich, that the rescue became a thing of legend. The companions say that Ulrich became more and more lucid toward the end, and revealed things that day in the desert which only made sense in the light of later events. He continually returned to the belief that he had been betrayed. Ulrich babbled about a suit of armor so powerful that its wearer was invulnerable to attack and tireless in battle. He claimed that it was buried somewhere in the eastern desert, and that he had been sent by the head to retrieve it. They say Ulrich talked about the head often, ridiculing the Nine's belief that it was one of the Avatara of Connaught. Connaught was the great hero of the Wind Age, who drove the evil Moagim from the earth, and the head claims to have been one of Connaught's closest advisors during this time. Once Ulrich even spoke of the head's defeat by Balor, where it lost its body. But I've begun to wonder how one of the Avatara of the Wind Age outlived Connaught himself by hundreds of years to fight Balor in a battle long before the West had even heard of the Fallen Lords. I have been unable to reconcile this with what I know of history. Sunday, November 30th, outskirts of Silver Mines. The old stories all tell that when Balor freed the Watcher from his prison under the Cloud Spine, one arm was left trapped in his prison of solid rock. Bound by a powerful confinement dream, it should have remained there forever, but it didn't. We're 100 miles from Bagrada, and 2 days ahead of the rest of the Legion today, outside a town called Silver Mines, looking for the Watcher's arm. You have no idea how small it makes you feel to be poking around the ruins of an abandoned town looking for the shriveled arm of the second or third most powerful sorcerer in living memory. I don't understand how the arm got to Silver Mines, or how the Nine knew where to look for it, but I can tell they want it bad. They hope to use the Watcher's arm against him if we find it, rather like knowing his true name, only better. Again, I don't pretend to understand. Problem is, the Deceiver is thinking the same thing. Some of the Fallen are over millennia old, and their rivalries go back just as far. We know the Deceiver is looking for the arm too, and has been digging up silver mines since last summer. We're going in this evening to grab it. Sunday, November 30th, foothills of the Cloud Spine. The enormous volcano overlooking Seven Gates is erupting for the first time in 10 centuries. The tremors started late yesterday, and since midnight there has been a constant rain of hot ash and fire. Even here, 30 miles away, it already feels like summer. As if the mountain's fury were an ill omen, Rabican was encircled and crushed by the Watcher, who attacked by surprise from the west. The survivors of the battle who have reached us speak of ribbons of fire tearing flesh from bone, and thick clouds of poison which rotted whole formations of men to pieces in moments. Our wizards were powerless to stop the carnage. They also say that the pass of Seven Gates has become a raging river, fed by snow melting as the volcano heats the earth around it. The defenders who remained in the pass are surely drowned, and in a few days, when the water is gone, the pass will be open again and undefended. But none of this concerns us. What remains of the Silver Mines garrison is less than 10 minutes behind us now, determined to claim the arm. We are all too exhausted to continue running, and our scouts have chosen a hill up ahead where we can make a stand. I've heard there are a number of our own men among those pursuing us, turned to the dark by the Deceiver. None of us look forward to meeting them in battle. Sunday, December 7th, Seven Gates. The Watcher drove his army without rest through the fleeing remnants of Rabican's forces and into Seven Gates. We are there now, inside the pass, where he then clashed with the Deceiver on his way east. The bodies of the undead are everywhere, melted and broken. It seems inconceivable that anything could have survived. I don't know why he attacked the Deceiver, unless somehow he found out what was going on in silver mines. One of the veterans said that these two had it out after the battle for Tyr 12 years ago, and that the Watcher barely survived. I have a feeling the real reasons for what happened today go back even farther than that. Whatever the case, while the battle raged only a few miles away and we thought the Watcher was coming for us next, I was glad nobody had asked me to carry his damned arm. It looks like the volcano will keep Seven Gates open through the winter, so Maeldun is sending out patrols to retake the pass. The Legion's growing fame seems to draw danger like a bright candle attracts moths, and if any of the enemy survive the floods and fighting, I'm sure we'll be the ones to find them. So ends the 17th year of the war. Tuesday, May 19th, the edge of Forest Heart. It's spring again, and after 5 months of rest, the Legion is once more on the move. Last week we passed through Seven Gates into the eastern lands over the cloud spine. The Fallen seem to have abandoned the mountains, but for what reason we cannot tell. The Legion is here alone, camped on the edge of Forest Heart and dangerously far into the territory of the enemy. 2 of the 9 are with us, Kulroy and Mergen, trying to make contact with the forest giants who live in this place to beg their help against the dark. No man has seen one of the giants since the first battle for Seven Gates 13 years ago. They helped contain the fury of Balor himself for 3 years, but on the 4th they did not return, and the pass was lost. One of our scouts just came crashing through the brush, winded, and a crowd of excited men has gathered around him. Someone hurrying out of the group paused beside me long enough to say, "Soulblighter is here. Put that in your journal." Date unknown, inside the Tain. I do not understand what has happened. Falling back before 2 myrmidons in Forest Heart, I was enveloped by a greenish haze which tore me from the earth. Now I find myself here, in a vast underground cavern with many of my comrades. We have been unable to find any way to the surface. Mergen believes us to be trapped inside the Tain, a relic forged by the smiths of Myrthemni during the Wind Age. Soon after its construction, the Tain was taken from Myrthemni by raiding barbarians from the south and believed to be lost forever. But they say that the darkest artifacts have the ability to bend men to their will, calling soundlessly to the wicked and discontent from thousands of miles away or hundreds of feet beneath the earth or sea, and that in this way they always come to light again, no matter how buried or forgotten. So it was that Soulblighter rediscovered the Tain. The artifact was used only once before it disappeared by Connaught against the terrible race of the Mercridia. Until now, Mergen said, no man except its creators knew where its victims were taken. I'll try to feel privileged while I starve to death. I have nothing more to write. Date unknown, inside the Tain. Tradition tells us almost nothing of the Mercridia, save for the horrible skull platforms they would build from the severed heads of their enemies. We found one of these a few hours ago, 30 feet high and 100 feet across, each skull arranged with a mad precision that was terrifying to behold. Many of the skulls were human, or at least humanoid, but among these were others which were certainly not, whose shapes and curves I have tried to forget ever since. In the center of the platform, far above our heads, rose the ancient battle standard of the Mercridia. We left immediately. Mergen believes that we are close to finding a back door, a secret exit from the Tain added by its creators so they could escape the thing if it were ever used against them. It will be hidden, of course, and almost certainly protected by traps, but it is our only chance of escape. These caves are so vast that we've been able to locate less than 50 of the 4,000 men we suspect are imprisoned with us. Mergen hopes that he can release the others after we have escaped by destroying the Tain at the exit. I asked him if doing so would also set free everything which had ever been imprisoned in the Tain, but got no response. Sunday, May 23rd, near Mirgard. I think Soulblighter lost his nerve when the Tain shattered. To him, only a few seconds passed between the invocation of the thing and its sudden destruction, while it took us 2 days to escape the caves inside it. Anyway, he didn't stick around to figure out what went wrong. Messengers reached us today saying that Maeldan had lost Bagrada, and that the Deceiver crossed the mountains at the Stair of Grief. Worst of all, what's left of the Nine had it out with the head, which had apparently been double-crossing them ever since they pulled it out of the ground last summer. Something like a civil war erupted back west too, as thousands of our own men unexpectedly rose to defend the head. 2 of the 9 were killed, which makes them something like the 3 now, if you also subtract Mergen and Kuroy, who did not escape the destruction of the Tain, and the others who have died this year. The only good news is that Ulrich is still alive and will join us tomorrow. This far east, the dwarves with us are closer to their occupied homelands than any of their race has been in 50 years. Not expecting to return, many of them have decided to give up their lives rather than abandon their country once again to the ghouls who have overrun it. What follows is their story.
I wish Balin would hurry up.
Tuesday, May 24th, Mirgard. What I record next is hearsay, though the dwarves who remained with us after Forest Heart swear by its truth. It seems impossible that they could have any knowledge of events occurring hundreds of miles away, deep in territory long held by the ghouls, yet their conviction does not yield. I repeat here their story, and allow the reader to come to his own decision. Led by their pathfinder, Balin, the dwarves landed in the midst of a sea of ghouls and laid waste to them with grenades and satchel charges. But the enemy boiled like ants from their burrows in the mountain, and each one that was killed seemed to be replaced by 2 others. Yet at last the attacks ceased, and the dwarves found themselves masters of the bloody patch of ground where they had taken their stand. Bodies and pieces of bodies lay everywhere. A swift council followed their unexpected victory, and the survivors resolved to locate the ghouls' ancestral stone godhead and blast it to fragments. The ghouls have worshipped this enormous piece of unworked stone since the birth of their race, rolling its 100 tons wherever their migrations have taken them. The continued presence of the ghouls' idol at Mirgard is a blasphemy, and to destroy it would be to spit in the face of their entire race. Now more than ever, the dwarves expected to die. Monday, June 15th, the edge of the Dire Marsh. The Legion has come 250 miles in little more than 2 weeks, not returning west to safety, but headed north toward the melted cities of the Trow and Balor's fortress. Back in Forest Heart, Ulrich convinced our officers that the west was lost, that our small force could contribute nothing to the hopeless battles that would soon be fought around Madrigal, Willow, and Tandem. These cities would fall, he said, and all their people would die whether we sacrificed ourselves or not. Then he told us what we could do instead. Ulrich was interrogated by Balor during his captivity, and he learned by chance that Balor had bound each of the fallen to himself to ensure their obedience to his will. The fallen draw their power through these links, and were Balor to be killed, they would all be powerless. the armies of the dark would collapse. So Balor must fall. But today we are only at the edge of the dire marsh, nearly 500 miles from his fortress, with the Watcher waiting in ambush ahead and Soulblighter shadowing us from behind. We have a long road before us. A few men and I are leaving the main column in a few moments to discover the fate of a scouting party which has not returned. None of us expect to find them alive, but we must recover an artifact carried by their leader, Griulman, Lieutenant of Archers. Wednesday, June 24th, the south bank of the Giol. The Legion has reached the Giol, the poisoned river which feeds the dire marsh. Soulblighter has been continuously engaging our rear guard for the last 2 days. Between this and the Watcher's many ambushes along the way, it seems as if the two fallen are racing to see which can destroy us first. We will cross the river at midnight, but leave a number of men in ambush for Soulblighter when he tries to follow. Ulrich intends to hit the Watcher while Soulblighter is delayed, and then flee north before either can force a decisive battle. Yesterday I saw Yu Shi, captain of archers, with a fist full of white arrows 5 feet long and tipped with fragments of bone. I lost track of who was carrying the Watcher's arm when we fled Silver Mines, but I suspect it's turned up again. I was one of the men chosen to hold the Giol against Soulblighter. Thursday, June 25th, near the Watcher's camp. We retreated from the river into chaos. There was no time to write until the following day, when we finally left the swamp for drier ground in the north. We held Soulblighter at the Giol long enough to let Ulrich spring his trap on the Watcher. Turned out I was right about those arrows. Ulrich had been working on them since we entered the marsh 2 weeks ago, and they were tipped with fragments of bone from the Watcher's arm. I sure wouldn't have wanted to get stuck with one, but apparently they turned the Watcher into stone, leaving him paralyzed and helpless. But he didn't die. 30 berserks chosen to accompany the archers tore through the enemy and piled the bodies of the dead at the Watcher's feet, but all were killed before they could deliver the final blow. Rather than leave such a dangerous enemy behind us to be rescued, 100 men have volunteered to return and smash him to fragments before help can arrive. Monday, July 20th, outside Rhiannon. None of us miss the mosquitoes and leeches of the marsh, but this bleak landscape is hardly better. We are outside the old Trow city of Rhiannon, abandoned centuries ago in the war which nearly exterminated their race. Each hour brings us closer to Balor's fortress, and almost certainly to the end of our own lives. After weeks of shadowing us, Soulblighter's army vanished after the battle on the Giol. He's certain to show up again soon, but meanwhile it's given us a welcome rest from fighting. Ulrich has been busy again, hardly sleeping I'm told, planning for the coming battle. A single berserk reached us yesterday, after having come all the way over the mountains from the city of Willow, 1,400 miles away. He delivered to Ulrich a single package the size of a man's fist wrapped in rags, and refuses to talk with anyone about events in the West. A small group of us are going into the city ahead of the main force tomorrow to secure a bridge, which Ulrich fears the enemy would destroy if we attacked in force. Once it has been secured, the Legion will follow. Tuesday, July 21st, Rhiannon. I am not a coward. I think that my actions over the last 17 years prove this. Yet I was relieved to not be among those chosen to die. In 4 hours, just after sunrise, the 2,200 survivors of the Legion will attack Balor's fortress. Those men will surely die. There are perhaps 500,000 of the enemy between here and the stronghold. Ulrich left at dusk, alone. The old maps, he says, all show a world not in Rhiannon, though it has never been used in our time. He intends to find it and bring through 100 picked men to a point he believes will be almost on top of the fortress. From there, we go after Balor. We have watched a dim comet grow brighter each night until now it is visible by day, and at night brighter than the moon. Some of the men have taken it as an omen for ill, but only the next few days will tell. Before he left, Ulrich told us that Madrigal had fallen. Tuesday, July 21st, the fortress. Ulrich's plan is a mad one. One of the many strange things we found while trapped inside the Tain was the shredded battle standard of that long-dead race of evil creatures called the Mircridia. I thought that we had left it behind, but someone must have climbed that horrible pile of skulls and brought it out with them when we escaped. The Mircridia were the most vicious servants of the Dark in another time, now long past, and Balor himself imprisoned them within the Tain. Or at least that's what Ulrich says. I'd always heard that the Mircridia were hunted to extinction by Connaught, the great hero of the Wind Age. Ulrich says Connaught and Balor are 2 different names for the same person. I think 4 months in the desert addled his mind. How could the greatest hero of the Wind Age, the king of Mjolnir during its golden age, become the greatest evil of our time? Ulrich intends to approach within 100 yards of the fortress and raise the Mircridian standard. Because of Balor's old enmity toward the Mircridia, Ulrich is certain that this will so enrage Balor that he will come to deal with us himself. All we have to do is plant the standard and wait.
Kill him! Kill him!
Tuesday, July 21st, the Great Devoid. Balor has been killed before, Ulrich told us after we raised the Mircridian standard, and each time it has only made him more powerful. Our best hope is to cut off his head and hurl it into the Great Devoid. Only in this way will the world be rid of him forever. As Balor approached, Ulrich drew from his robe one of the 5 Eblis stones, and for a few moments it made him an equal of Balor. I have no doubt that this is what was brought to him yesterday, though where it was found, or how Ulrich arranged for it to be delivered, I have no idea. I am only certain that he must have set this plan in motion months ago. There are fewer than 30 of us now, most of whom are men I've never seen before. The rest of the Legion was sacrificed in front of the fortress to give us time to take Balor's head while Ulrich held them motionless. After writing these last lines, I will bury this manuscript so that it may survive even if we do not. After all the danger we have faced, it seems ridiculous to do that only now. I cannot see what could possibly stand between us and the Great Devoid, only a few thousand yards away.
You know how hard it is to strangle the undead.